Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi didn't knock. He walked into the officers' mess, and 23 pilots stopped mid-bite, chopsticks frozen, teacups suspended. "Gentlemen," his voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk, "Japan is losing this war." No one moved. You didn't contradict an admiral. You didn't even breathe loudly. Onishi pulled out a chair, sat, folded his hands on the table like he was about to discuss the weather, not mass suicide. "The Americans have more ships than we have pilots, more planes than we have fuel, more bullets than we have bodies." He paused, let that sink in. "But we have something they don't. We have pilots willing to die with certainty. They send men hoping to return. We will send men guaranteed not to." Lieutenant Sato, the oldest among them, at 32, cleared his throat. "Sir, are you ordering us to—" "I'm not ordering anything." Onishi's eyes were empty, like he'd already died inside and was just waiting for his body to catch up. "I'm asking, who volunteers to become a Special Attack Unit Silence? Not because they were afraid, because volunteering made it seem like they had a choice. They didn't. Everyone in that room knew it. Finally, Lieutenant Yukio Seki stood. "I have a wife, I have a daughter, I want to watch her grow up." His voice cracked. "But if my death gives them one more day of peace, I volunteer." Onishi nodded. "You will lead the first unit." Seki would die 4 days later crashing into the USS St. Lo, the first official kamikaze kill. By the time Kaworu Hagawa heard about it 6 months later in a training barracks 2,000 miles away, 3,000 more pilots had followed Seki into the Pacific. None came back. March 1942, Tsuchiura Naval Air Training Base. 2 years earlier. Hagawa's boots were too big. They belonged to the previous recruit dead in a training accident, someone said. Or maybe he'd washed out. Nobody wanted to ask. Formation. Instructor. Nakamura's voice could strip paint. Now, 63 recruits scrambled into lines. Hagawa was 18th, always somewhere in the middle, not good enough to stand out, not bad enough to quit. Bull, they bent at the waist, 90 degrees. Any less and Nakamura's bamboo stick found your spine. "Duty is heavier than a mountain," Nakamura screamed. "Duty is heavier than a mountain," they screamed back. "Death is lighter than a feather." "Death is lighter than a feather." Hagawa's thighs burned. Sweat dripped onto the concrete. Beside him, Cadet Fujimoto started shaking. "Hold it." Nakamura walked between them, stick tapping against his leg. "A pilot who cannot endure cannot fly. A pilot who cannot die." Fujimoto collapsed. The stick found him 3 times before he could stand. Blood trickled from his ear. "Weak," Nakamura spat. "The enemy will not give you time to rest. The ocean will not give you mercy. Why should I?" That night, Fujimoto's bunk was empty. No one asked where he went. "You think he quit?" whispered Cadet Yoshida from the bunk above Hagawa. "I think they sent him somewhere worse." "Where's worse than here?" Hagawa didn't answer, but 6 months later, he'd find out. July 1944, Lake Kasumigura, flight training. The Yokosuka K5Y biplane call sign Willow handled like a drunk elephant, underpowered, unstable, unforgiving. "You're drifting left," Instructor Ito screamed through the speaking tube. "Correct." Hagawa yanked the stick right. Too hard. The Willow shuddered, threatened to spin. "Not like that, you fool. Gentle in aircraft is a woman. You seduce her, you don't rape her." Hagawa's hands were slick with sweat inside his leather gloves. The horizon tilted. The lake rushed up. Pull up, pull up. He hauled back on the stick. The engine screamed. The wings groaned. For one terrible second, he thought they'd snap off. They leveled out at 200 feet. "Land, now, before you kill us both." Hagawa brought the Willow down, bounced twice. The landing gear shrieked in protest, but held. When they climbed out, Ito's face was pale. "You have 387 flight hours, Hagawa. American pilots have 600 before they see combat. Do you know why?" "No, sir." "Because they expect their pilots to survive. We don't." Ito lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "You're good enough to die. That's all Japan needs now." 3 days later, Cadet Morita died when his K5Y stalled on takeoff and plowed into the trees. They scraped his body out with shovels. His bunk stayed empty for 2 days before a new recruit filled it. No funeral, no memorial. Just a notation in the logbook, training accident, continue operations. February 3rd, 1945. Kanoya Air Base, Kyushu. Lieutenant Commander Hagawa. Captain Takeo Noda looked 60 but was 32. His uniform hung off him like he'd shrunk inside it. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare that men get when they've watched too many pilots not come back. "You're being reassigned to the 752nd Naval Air Group." Hagawa's stomach dropped. Everyone knew what the 752nd was. A Toko unit. Special attack? Kamikaze. "Sir, There's no refusing." Noda pulled out a map pointed at Okinawa. "The Americans will invade here in April. When they do, they'll be 400 miles from Tokyo, from your family, from everyone you've ever loved." He looked up. "You trained as a pilot. Now you'll serve as a weapon." "How many missions, sir?" Noda almost smiled. 1. March 18, 1945. First mission. 6:23 a.m. The P-1Y Francis call sign Ginga Milky Way sat on the tarmac like a predator. Twin engines. 250-kilogram bomb strapped underneath. Fuel for a one-way trip. Ground Crew Chief Tanaka handed Hagawa his helmet. Wouldn't meet his eyes. "Oil pressure's low," Tanaka muttered. "Doesn't matter." "Starboard engine runs hot." "Doesn't matter." "Ikami-ime." Tanaka grabbed his arm. "You matter, Lieutenant Commander." Hagawa had no answer for that. What do you say to a man who's preparing your hearse? He climbed into the cockpit. The leather seat still held warmth from its previous pilot. Dead 2 days now, crashed into an American destroyer, missed, died in the ocean with a jammed bomb that never detonated. Hagawa strapped in, checked his instruments. Everything read normal, which meant nothing. Half these gauges were broken anyway. 6:29 a.m. Engines fired. The Francis shuddered, coughed, roared. Captain Noda's voice crackled through the headset. "All units, the Emperor is watching. Do not shame him. Do not shame yourselves. Do not return." 3 words that meant come back and tie a die by firing squad. Hagawa released the brakes. March 18, 1945, 8:47 a.m., 12 miles from Task Force 58. Anti-aircraft fire turned the sky black. Each burst was a fist of steel trying to swat him down. The Francis bucked. Shrapnel punched through the fuselage. The canopy cracked but held. Through the smoke, Hagawa saw them American ships. Dozens. More than intelligence had reported. More than any sane pilot would attack alone. His wingmen were already gone. One shot down. One turned back with engine failure. Now it was just him. The USS Destroyer filled his gun sight. Range 2,000 yards. Closing. His thumb found the bomb release. This was it. Die with honor or live with shame. No third option. He pressed the toggle. Nothing. Pressed again. Nothing. The release mechanism was jammed. His training screamed at him. You are the bomb. Crash anyway. Your plane. Your body. Your honor. But his hand, his treacherous human survival-wired hand banked left, away, toward home. Unit 3 status. The radio crackled. Hagawa's mouth was dry as ash. Critical. Critical engine damage. Aborting. The lie tasted like cowardice, like failure, like the bitter, shameful relief of staying alive. March 18, 1945, 10:15 a.m. Back at Kanoya. Captain Noda was waiting on the tarmac, arms crossed. Face unreadable. Hagawa climbed out, legs shaking. Ground crew stared. Everyone knew the plane was intact. The bomb was still attached. He'd come back. Lieutenant Commander! Noda's voice was quiet, worse than shouting. You returned. The bomb failed to release, sir. Port engine was cool. Do you know how many men have volunteered to take your place? Noda stepped closer. Hagawa could smell the sake on his breath, smell the exhaustion. 17 men who want to die for Japan, and you who was given the honor come back with excuses. Sir, Tomorrow. You fly again tomorrow. Noda turned to leave, then stopped. My son was your age. He died at Midway. Didn't hesitate, didn't come back. His voice broke. He was braver than you. March 27th, 1945, second mission, 5:51 a.m. Rain hammered the canopy like bullets, visibility 0. Any sane Air Force would have grounded all flights, but Japan stopped being sane somewhere around 1942. Unit lead, I can't see anything. His wingman's voice was panicked. I'm turning back. Negative maintain formation. But the radio was already dead. Lightning had fried something. Hagawa flew alone in a steel coffin through a storm that wanted him dead almost as much as the Americans did. At 7:20 a.m., he broke through the clouds. Below ocean. Only ocean. No fleet. No reference points. His compass spun uselessly. The The storm had pushed him miles off course. Fuel gauge half empty. Maybe less. The choice was simple: die searching for a target that might not exist, or turn back and face Noda's fury. He turned back. When he landed at 9:03 a.m., Noda said nothing. Just looked at him for a long, terrible moment, then walked away. That silence was worse than any punishment. April 11th. 45. Night before the third mission. 11:00 p.m. "You still awake?" Lieutenant Yoshida whispered from the bunk above. "Yes." "Me too." Silence. Then, "You scared?" "Yes." "Me too." Hagawa stared at the ceiling. Someone had carved names into the wood. Previous pilots. Previous failed kamikaze. Previous dead men. "Do you think it hurts?" Yoshida asked. "The moment of impact." "I don't know. My mother used to tell me that cherry blossoms are beautiful because they fall. They don't cling to the branch. They accept their time is short." Yoshida's voice cracked. "But I never wanted to be a cherry blossom. I wanted to be an oak tree. I wanted to grow old and stubborn and watch my children climb my branches." Hagawa felt tears on his face. "Me too." "Then why are we doing this?" "Because they'll kill us if we don't." "They'll kill us either way." "Yes." More silence. Then Yoshida dropped something onto Hagawa's chest. A photograph. A woman. Pretty. Smiling. "My wife," Yoshida said. "If you survive and I don't tell her I wasn't brave, tell her I was terrified, tell her I cried, I want her to remember me as human, not a hero." "You're not going to survive." "My plane has no landing gear. I checked. The wheels won't retract. I can take off, but I can't land." His voice was eerily calm. "They're making sure I don't come back this time." Hagawa's blood ran cold. "Yoshida." "It's fine? Really? At least I know. At least I'm not lying to myself anymore." At 11:47 p.m., Hagawa started writing a letter. His hands didn't shake. That scared him more than anything. "Dear Mother and Father, by the time you read this, I will be dead or I will be executed for cowardice. Either way, I will not see you again. I want you to know I was afraid. I am afraid. The propaganda says we die joyfully. That's a lie. We die terrified. I don't want to be a hero. I just want to come home. But home doesn't exist for people like me anymore. It burned when the B-29s came. It drowned when our fleet sank. It died when the war started. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't brave enough. I wasn't strong enough. I came back twice, and now they're going to make sure I don't come back a third time. If you remember me, remember I loved you. Remember I tried. That's all anyone can do." He folded the letter, put it under his pillow, lay back down. At 12:03 a.m., Yoshida whispered one more thing. "Hey, Hagawa. Yeah. Thanks for being my friend. You too. See you on the other side. See you." But Hagawa knew better. There was no other side. Just the ocean, just the fire, just the end. April 12, 1945, 4:30 a.m., the final morning. No one spoke during the walk to the flight line. 23 pilots. 23 pairs of boots crunching gravel. 23 men who wouldn't see tomorrow. Captain Noda held the sake tray. 23 cups. The ritual farewell. Hagawa took his cup. Raised it. The sake burned going down. Everything burned now. "Today you fulfill your duty," Noda said. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been screaming or crying. "The Emperor watches. The ancestors watch. Japan watches." Hagawa wanted to ask, "And if they're all watching, why isn't anyone helping?" But he didn't. He just bowed, turned, walked to his plane, P-1Y Francis Tail number 27311. Ground crew had painted a rising sun on the nose. Someone's idea of encouragement. Tanaka was there again. Still wouldn't meet his eyes. "This one's airworthy," Tanaka said quietly. "I made sure. You deserve a plane that flies right." "Thank you." "Don't thank me, just..." Tanaka finally looked up. "Just make it mean something." But Hagawa didn't know what it could possibly mean. Dying for an empire that was already dead. Killing enemy sailors who were just men like him with mothers and wives and children they wanted to come home to. What did any of it mean? 5:17 a.m. Engines fired. Yoshida's plane 27-309 was 2 spots down. Even from here, Hagawa could see the landing gear was fixed in place. No retraction mechanism. A one-way ticket made of steel. Yoshida caught his eye. Gave a small salute. Hagawa saluted back. 5:19 a.m. Wheels left the ground. Kanoya Air Base fell away beneath him. Japan fell away. Everything fell away. Ahead the ocean. The Americans. The end. But in 73 minutes, Kaworu Hagawa would discover that endings are complicated, that mercy exists in the strangest places, that the enemy sometimes refuses to play the role you've written for them, because at 6:47 a.m., when his plane finally fell from the sky in pieces, when the ocean rose up to claim him, when he was certain death had finally caught up, someone would reach down into the water and pull him back. And that's when the real story would begin. The flight took 73 minutes. Hagawa counted every one of them. At 6:32 a.m., the American fleet appeared on the horizon, gray shapes against gray water like ghosts made of steel. More ships than he'd been told. Intelligence was always wrong. Or lying. Probably both. "Contact," he radioed. 11 o'clock, 20 miles. Yoshida's voice crackled back. "I see them. God help us." God left Japan a long time ago. They descended to wave-top height. 50 feet, then 30. Salt spray misted the canopy. One mistake here and the ocean would swallow them before the Americans even knew they were coming. 6:41 a.m. The Americans knew. The first anti-aircraft burst bloomed directly ahead, a black flower that appeared and vanished in a heartbeat. Then another, then 50. Then the entire sky turned into a wall of exploding steel. Something punched through Hagawa's left wing. He felt the impact through the control stick. Another hole appeared in the fuselage so close he could have reached out and touched it. "Tanaka's gone," someone screamed over the radio. Hagawa risked a glance. Ensign Tanaka's plane 27315 was a fireball tumbling into the sea. No parachute, no time. Just fire and water and nothing. "Stay with me," Hagawa shouted to Yoshida. "I see a destroyer. I'm going in. Wait." But Yoshida was already diving, already committed. The Americans tracked him with every gun they had. Tracers made bright lines in the air, beautiful and deadly, like calligraphy written in light. Yoshida's port wing separated. The plane spun. Out of control. Spiral. Down. He hit the ocean 200 yards from his target. The explosion sent up a geyser of white water that collapsed back into foam. Gone. Just like that. His wife would get a letter. His parents would get a flag. His daughter, if she survived the war, would get nothing but a name she couldn't remember and a photograph of a man who died being brave when he wanted to be human. Now it was just Hagawa, alone, with a bomb that had failed twice before and a promise that this time he wouldn't come back. He picked his target destroyer, Bow number 792. Later he'd learn it was the USS Callahan. Right now it was just steel and guns and the place he was supposed to die. Range 3,000 yards. Closing. Anti-aircraft fire intensified. The Francis shook like it was coming apart, and maybe it was. Shrapnel riddled the fuselage. The starboard engine coughed black smoke. The canopy cracked in 3 places. 2,000 yards. Hagawa could see individual sailors now running to their stations, pointing at him, mouths open, in shouts he couldn't hear over the roar of his dying engines. 500 yards. His thumb found the bomb release one last time. This was it. No more failures. No more shame. Just the end. He pressed the toggle. The bomb released. For one perfect terrible moment, Hagawa felt weightless, like the plane had exhaled and was floating free. The mathematics of death made simple his speed, plus gravity, plus 250 kilograms of high explosive equals 1 American destroyer at the bottom of the Pacific. But the starboard engine chose that moment to explode. Not malfunction, not fail. Explode. The blast tore through the cowling, sent shrapnel through the cockpit, shattered the instrument panel. Something hot and sharp sliced across Hagawa's shoulder. The control stick went dead in his hand. Either the cables had snapped or his arms had stopped working. He couldn't tell which. The Francis pitched hard right. Rolled. The ocean filled the windscreen. Hagawa's last conscious thought was, "I've failed again." Then the plane hit the water at 287 miles per hour, and the world turned into noise and pain and darkness and cold. So cold. Doom. 6:49 a.m., 2 minutes after impact. Hagawa woke up drowning, water in his lungs, water in his eyes, water everywhere. He was sinking still, strapped to his seat, the plane dragging him down into darkness that had no bottom. His hands found the harness release. Pulled. Nothing. The mechanism was jammed or bent, or his fingers weren't working right. Everything was wrong. Everything hurt. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't. The harness gave. He kicked free, swam up, or what he thought was up. No light, no sense of direction. Just cold and pressure, and the certainty that he was going to die here alone, in enemy water, having accomplished nothing except disappointing everyone who'd ever believed in him. His head broke the surface. Air. Sweet, burning, beautiful air. He gasped, choked, vomited seawater, gasped again. Around him debris. Pieces of his plane. A seat cushion. Part of a wing. An oil slick spreading across the water like a bruise. And 600 yards away, the USS Callahan still afloat, still fighting guns, still firing at targets. Hagawa couldn't see. He'd missed. Of course he'd missed. He'd failed twice before. Why would the third time be different? Blood clouded the water around him, his blood from wounds he couldn't feel yet, because the cold was eating everything. His left arm didn't work right. His shoulder was either dislocated or broken. Maybe both. He treaded water with one arm and watched the Callahan and waited to die. Drowning or blood loss or hypothermia didn't matter which. Dead was dead. At least the ocean was cleaner than a firing squad. At 6:53 a.m. he heard engines. A small boat. Motor launch. American. Coming straight toward him. Hagawa's heart stopped. They were coming to finish him, to shoot him, to make sure he died the way he was supposed to, at enemy hands and enemy water, as an enemy of everything they stood for. He almost went under, almost let the ocean take him. Better to drown than give them the satisfaction, but his body, his treacherous, stubborn, survival-wired body, kept him afloat. The launch pulled alongside. 3 sailors, young, 19, maybe 20. They looked terrified. One of them pointed a rifle at Hagawa's head. "Don't move, Jap." Hagawa didn't move. Couldn't have even if he wanted to. The cold had locked his muscles. He just floated there, bleeding, waiting for the bullet. The sailor with the rifle looked at his companions. "What do we do?" Captain said. "Fish him out." "He's the enemy. Captain's orders." The second sailor, a kid with red hair and freckles who looked like he should be throwing a baseball, not fishing, enemy pilots out of the Pacific, reached down. "Grab my hand." Hagawa stared at the hand. Didn't understand. This was a trick, a trap. They'd pull him up, then shoot him, or torture him, or, "Jesus, he's bleeding bad," the red-haired sailor said. "Come on, buddy. We're not going to hurt you." The word buddy broke something in Hagawa's brain. The enemy wasn't supposed to call you buddy. The enemy was supposed to be inhuman, monstrous evil. That's what the propaganda said. That's what made killing them possible. But this sailor, this terrified red-haired American kid, looked at Hagawa like he was a person who needed help. Hagawa grabbed the hand. They pulled him into the launch. Laid him on the deck. Someone pressed a cloth to his shoulder. The bleeding was worse than he'd thought. Someone else covered him with a blanket that smelled like diesel fuel and salt. "You're going to be okay," the red-haired sailor said. "You're going to be fine." But Hagawa wasn't fine. He was alive. And alive was the worst thing he could possibly be. 7:17 a.m. USS Callahan, main deck. They carried Hagawa up on a stretcher. Sailors stopped working to stare. A few spat. One shouted something Hagawa didn't understand, but the tone was clear enough. Hatred. "Move." The red-haired sailor name tag read Morrison shouted. "Courseman needs space." A medic knelt beside Hagawa, older, 30-something, face lined with exhaustion. He cut away Hagawa's flight suit, examined the shoulder wound, made a sound that wasn't reassuring. "Through and through. Missed the bone. Lucky." Lucky. That word again. "I'm Doc Williams," the medic said, not looking at Hagawa's face, just working. "This is gonna hurt." He poured something on the wound, alcohol or iodine or liquid fire, Hagawa couldn't tell. The pain was white-hot, immediate, overwhelming. He screamed. I know. Williams kept working. "But if I don't clean it, infection will kill you in 3 days." Hagawa wanted to tell him that would be fine, that death was the point, that he'd failed his mission, and living was worse than dying. But the words wouldn't come. Only the pain came. Williams bandaged the shoulder, checked Hagawa's pupils, listened to his chest. Possible concussion, definitely hypothermia, probably broken ribs. He looked up at someone Hagawa couldn't see. "He needs a hospital ship." "New Mexico's got a full surgical suite," a voice said. "We'll transfer him." Hagawa's vision blurred. The deck tilted. Voices faded in and out like bad radio. "Stay with me," Williams said, but his voice was distant underwater. "Stay." Darkness took him again. He woke up to the sound of American voices. "How's our Kamikaze, kid?" "Stable, fever's down, shoulders healing clean." "Think he speaks English?" "Probably not, but he understands we saved his life, right? He's gotta understand that." Hagawa opened his eyes. White ceiling, white walls, white sheets. Everything white except the faces standing over him. 4 sailors watching him like he was a curiosity in a zoo. One of them, tall, dark-haired, maybe 25, leaned closer. "You awake?" Hagawa said nothing. His throat was raw, his head pounded, his shoulder burned. "I'm Petty Officer Martin." The man spoke slowly, carefully, like talking to a child. "You're on the USS New Mexico. You're safe. Nobody's gonna hurt you." Safe. What did that word even mean anymore? Another sailor, shorter, nervous, whispered, "Why are we even keeping him alive? He tried to kill us." "Stow it, Barnes." Martin didn't look away from Hagawa. "He's a prisoner of war. Geneva Convention applies." "Convention don't mean shit when they're crashing planes into our ships." "I said stow it." Martin pulled up a chair, sat down beside the bed. "You got a name?" Hagawa stared at the ceiling. Name, rank, serial number, that's all a prisoner was required to give. That's all he would give. "Okay." Martin nodded. "You don't gotta talk. I get it. You're scared. You think we're gonna..." He trailed off, searching for words. "Listen, I know what your people told you about us. I know you think we're devils, monsters, but we're just sailors, just guys who want to go home, same as you." Hagawa's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, "I can't go home. Don't you understand? I failed. I came back." Home doesn't exist for me anymore, but he said nothing. Martin stood. "Corpsman will bring you food later. Try to eat. You lost a lot of blood." He walked to the door, paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you lived. I've seen enough death. We all have." Jikuni, after they left, Hagawa stared at the white ceiling and calculated how many ways he could die here. Strangle himself with the bedsheet. Possible, but someone would stop him. Reopen his shoulder wound, too slow, too painful. Refuse food and water, they'd force-feed him. He was trapped, not by the Americans, by his own survival, by the mercy of men who should have been his executioners. That night, lying in the darkness, he wept. Not from pain, not from fear, from the unbearable weight of being alive when he was supposed to be dead, when honor demanded death, when every moment of breath was another moment of failure. April 15, 1945. 3 days later. USS New Mexico Medical Bay. Doc Williams brought him rice. Real rice. Not the watery gruel they'd given Japanese soldiers at Kanoya. Actual rice with fish and vegetables. "Eat," Williams said. "Your skin and bones." Hagawa looked at the food. His stomach clenched with hunger and shame. Hunger won. He ate. Slowly at first, then faster. The rice was still warm. When was the last time he'd eaten warm food, March, February? While Williams watched him eat. "You were a pilot." Not a question. Hagawa swallowed. Said nothing. "A good one, probably. They don't send bad pilots on suicide runs, only the ones skilled enough to actually hit something." Williams poured him water. "How old are you?" Silence. 2021. Williams shook his head. "My son's 19, training to be a pilot. Every night I pray he never has to do what you did." That broke something in Hagawa. He looked up, met Williams's eyes. "Your son is not like me." English. Broken accented, but English. Williams didn't look surprised. "You speak our language. Studied at university. Before war. Before..." Hagawa's voice cracked. "Before everything." "What's your name, son?" "Kaworu Hagawa, Lieutenant Commander, Imperial Japanese Navy." The words felt like stones in his mouth. "Serial number." "I don't need your number. I just need to know what to call you." Williams refilled his water. "I'm James Williams, from Ohio. Got 3 kids back home. Wife's name is Dorothy. She writes me letters every week telling me to stay safe, come home, don't be a hero." He smiled sadly. "But out here, staying alive is the only heroism that matters." Hagawa felt tears sting his eyes. "Why did you save me?" "Because you needed saving." "I am your enemy." "You were my enemy. Now you're my patient." Williams stood. "Get some rest, Kaworu. Tomorrow we dock at Guam. You'll be transferred to a POW camp." After Williams left, Hagawa stared at his hands that had flown 3 missions, failed, 3 times, killed, no one saved, nothing. Hands that should be dead. Around 200 a.m., when the watch changed and the corridor was empty, Hagawa tried to hang himself with the bedsheet. He'd gotten as far as tying the noose when Petty Officer Martin walked in to check on him. "Jesus Christ!" Martin grabbed him, pulled him down, held him, and while Hagawa fought and screamed, and bid and begged in Japanese and English and some hybrid language of despair that had no name. "Let me die, please, let me die." No, Martin's grip was iron. "No, we didn't pull you out of the ocean just to let you kill yourself. You don't understand. I cannot live with this shame. I failed my mission. I came back. I am a coward. I am. You're a human being. Martin's voice cracked. You're a kid who got thrown into a war you didn't start. And you're alive. That's not a crime. That's not shameful. That's just what happened. Hagawa collapsed against him, sobbing. Martin held him, this enemy soldier, this failed kamikaze, this stranger, and didn't let go. It's okay, Martin whispered. It's okay to be alive. I promise. It's okay. But Hagawa knew it wasn't. In the moral mathematics of 1945, Japan's survival equaled dishonor. Honor equaled death. He'd chosen survival, or survival had chosen him, and now he had to live with being the equation that didn't add up. Later, after William sedated him, after they tied his hands to the bed rails for his own safety, Hagawa heard two sailors talking in the corridor. Poor bastard. Poor, he tried to kill us. No, he tried to kill himself. 3 times now. They keep saving him, and he keeps trying to die. That's what they did to him. Broke him so bad he can't even accept mercy. What kind of country does that to its own people? One that's losing, one that's desperate, one that's already dead and doesn't know it yet. Their footsteps faded. Hagawa stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of those words settle over him like a shroud. Japan was already dead. He'd known it, they'd all known it, but saying it out loud made it real. He'd tried to die for a corpse, for a lie, for an empire that existed only in propaganda posters and speeches from men who would never fly kamikaze missions themselves. And these Americans, these supposed devils, had pulled him from the water, fed him, bandaged him, and held him while he screamed. The world made no sense anymore. Or maybe it had never made sense and he was only now noticing. Outside the porthole, the Pacific stretched endless and dark. Somewhere beneath those waves, Yoshida and Tanaka were drifting food for fish, forgotten except in the letters their families would receive and the silence that would answer every question about why. But Hagawa was here, breathing, alive, saved by the enemy, drowning in mercy. And mercy, he was discovering, was the cruelest thing anyone had ever given him. April 18, 1945. They transferred him at dawn. Hagawa woke to the sound of chains not on him, but on other prisoners being moved through the ship's corridors. Japanese voices, weak, defeated, broken. On your feet! Petty Officer Martin stood in the doorway holding Hagawa's boots. We're docking at Guam in 20 minutes. You're being transferred to the POW camp. Hagawa sat up slowly. His shoulder still ached. His head pounded. But worse than the physical pain was the hollowness in his chest, like someone had reached in and scooped out everything that made him who he was. Martin helped him into his boots. Listen, I know you don't trust me. I get it. But the camp at Guam, it's not what you think. They'll treat you fairly. 3 meals a day, medical care, no torture, no executions. Why? The word came out raw. Why do you show mercy to people who tried to kill you? Martin tied the last bootlace sat back on his heels. Because we're not you. We don't believe in dying for the Emperor. We believe in living for our families. And if we start acting like animals, we become what we're fighting against. He stood, offered his hand to help Hagawa up. Hagawa stared at the hand. 4 days ago, American hands had pulled him from the ocean. American hands had bandaged his wounds. American hands had stopped him from hanging himself. He took the hand. Martin pulled him to his feet, and for a moment they stood there, enemy soldier and American sailor, both 20-something, both exhausted, both wondering how they'd ended up here. For what it's worth, Martin said quietly, I'm glad you made it. I am not. I know, but maybe someday you will be. They led him topside. The morning sun was blinding after days in the medical bay. Hagawa squinted, and through the glare he saw them 17 other Japanese prisoners lined up on the deck. Sailors, pilots, soldiers, all captured, all alive, all wearing the same expression of shame and confusion. One of them caught Hagawa's eye, an older man, maybe 40, with sergeant stripes still visible on his tattered uniform. The man gave him a slight nod. Acknowledgement. We're in this together now. The landing craft took them to shore at 0847 hours. Guam, American territory since July 1944, when the U.S. had retaken it from Japanese occupation. The irony wasn't lost on Hagawa. He was now a prisoner on an island Japan had once controlled. Marine Barracks Camp Dealey. That's what the sign said. Behind 12-foot chain-link fences topped with barbed wire rows of Quonset huts stretched across red volcanic soil. Guard towers every 100 yards. Searchlights, machine gun nests, a prison, but not the kind Hagawa had expected. Welcome to Dealey, Kaup, the Marine lieutenant at the gate said. No malice in his voice, just tired efficiency. You will be processed, assigned quarters, and given work details. You will be treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention. Any questions? The sergeant who'd nodded at Hagawa stepped forward. Will we be executed? No. Will we be tortured? No. Then what will you do with us? The lieutenant looked at him for a long moment. We're going to keep you alive until this war is over. Then we're going to send you home. Home. The word hit Hagawa like a fist. Home didn't exist anymore. Home was for men who'd fought honorably and died honorably. Home was for heroes, not for failed kamikazes who'd been saved by the enemy. They processed him in Building 7. Name, rank, serial number, medical examination, delousing, new clothes American dungarees with POW stenciled on the back in white paint. The ultimate humiliation wearing enemy clothes, marked with enemy letters that announced his failure to every eye. Barracks 12, the processing clerk said. Bunk 23, chows at 0600, 1200, and 1800, work detail assignments posted daily. Follow the rules and you'll be fine. Hagawa walked to Barracks 12 in a daze. Inside 32 bunks, 16 already occupied by Japanese prisoners who looked up when he entered, assessed him with tired eyes, then looked away. No one spoke. What was there to say? He found bunk 23. Bottom. The mattress was thin but clean. A wool blanket. A pillow. More comfort than he'd had in 6 months at Kanoya. The man in bunk 24, the sergeant from the landing craft, leaned over. First time as a prisoner, Hagawa nodded. Me too. Captured at Saipan, July 1944. Been here 9 months. He extended his hand. Sergeant Kenji Tanaka, 43rd Division. Hagawa shook it. Lieutenant Commander Kaworu Hagawa, 752nd Naval Air Group. Tanaka's eyes widened slightly. Naval Air Group, you're a pilot. Was. Kamikaze. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Hagawa said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Tanaka lay back on his bunk. There's 3 of you here now, kamikaze pilots who lived. The other 2 won't talk to anyone. They just sit in the corner during rec time and stare at nothing. He paused. The Americans don't understand. They think they're being merciful, keeping us alive. They don't understand they're condemning us to something worse than death. What could be worse? Living with the knowledge that we failed, that we're cowards, that our families will bear the shame of our survival. Tanaka's voice dropped to a whisper. Last month, one of the kamikaze pilots, Lieutenant Sato, hanged himself in the latrine. The Americans were devastated. They couldn't understand why. They'd given him food, shelter, safety. Why would he throw that away? Because safety is not what we need, Hagawa said. We need to not exist. Yes. They lay in silence for a while. Then Tanaka said something that would echo in Hagawa's mind for decades. But we do exist, whether we want to or not. So the question becomes, what do we do with this existence we didn't ask for? Hagawa had no answer. That night, lying in his American bunk under his American blanket in his American prison, Hagawa counted the ways he'd failed. Failed his missions 3 times. Failed his emperor. Failed his family. Failed Yoshida and Tanaka and every other pilot who had died doing what he couldn't. At 0347 hours, he heard crying from across the barracks. Soft, muffled. Someone trying not to be heard. No one went to comfort the crying man. Because comfort required hope, and hope had no place in a camp full of men who were supposed to be dead. April 25, 1945. 1 week into captivity. They assigned Hagawa to the kitchen detail. 4 hours a day, peeling potatoes, washing dishes, preparing meals for 400 prisoners and 150 guards. The work was mindless. Good. Mindless meant he didn't have to think. The mess sergeant was a Texan named Buck Wilson. Big, loud, surprisingly gentle. You know your way around a kitchen, son. Hagawa shook his head. Well, you're about to learn. Grab that peeler. See those potatoes? I want 'em naked by lunchtime. Hagawa peeled potatoes next to a young sailor named Hiroshi Yamada, 18 years old, captured when his submarine was sunk off Palau. The kid's hands shook constantly. Shell shock probably, or malnutrition, or the crushing weight of survival. You talk, Yamada asked after an hour of silence. Sometimes? What's the point? Talking doesn't change anything. No, it doesn't. They peeled in silence for another hour. Then Yamada said, My mother thinks I'm dead. The Navy sent her a letter. Killed in action, she had a funeral. My little sister cried for 3 days. His voice cracked. She doesn't know I'm here. Doesn't know I'm alive. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe. Do you have family? Hagawa nodded. Mother, father, brother, sister? Do they know you're alive? I don't know, probably not. He set down a peeled potato, picked up another. The last they heard, I was flying my third mission. They probably think I died honorably. They probably told people I was brave. Were you? No. Me neither. Yamada smiled bitterly. We're the worst kind of soldiers, not brave enough to die, not smart enough to survive well. Sergeant Wilson interrupted. Less talking, more peeling. Lunch won't make itself. They peeled faster. But Yamada whispered one more thing. There's a group, meets after lights out. Barracks 7. They talk about what happens after the war, about going home, about living. He glanced at Hagawa. You should come. Why would I want to talk about living? Because the alternative is what Lieutenant Sato did, and I don't think the Americans can take finding another body. That night at 2200 hours, Hagawa slipped out of his bunk and walked to Barracks 7. Inside, 8 men sat in a circle on the floor. Tanaka was there. So was Yamada. The other soldiers, sailors, airmen all looked haunted. All looked like they were searching for something they couldn't name. An older man, maybe 50, with gray hair and colonel's insignia that someone had tried to remove, gestured to an empty spot. Join us. Hagawa sat. I'm Colonel Masao Takeda, the man said. Former commander of the 31st Army, captured at Guam when the Americans retook the island. I've been here 13 months. He looked around the circle. We meet twice a week. We talk about things we can't say during the day, things the guards wouldn't understand, things our own people would call treason. Like what? Hagawa asked. Like the truth. Takeda leaned forward. The war is lost. Japan will surrender within months, maybe weeks. The Emperor will speak on the radio and tell us to lay down our arms, and everything we were told to believe will be revealed as a lie. That's treason, someone whispered. Is it treason to acknowledge reality? The Americans dropped fire on Tokyo. They took Iwo Jima. They're preparing to invade Okinawa. Our fleet is destroyed. Our air force is destroyed. Our army is starving. Takeda's voice was steady, factual. The only question is how many more people have to die before our leaders admit it. Then why are we here? Yamada asked. Why didn't they let us die with honor? Because honor is a luxury that dying empires cannot afford. Takeda looked at each of them in turn. The Americans believe that our lives have value beyond our utility as weapons. They believe that survival is not shameful. They believe, and this is the part that destroys us, they believe we deserve mercy. But we don't, Hagawa said. We tried to kill them. Yes, and they saved us anyway. That's what I'm trying to understand. How can the enemy be more compassionate than our own leaders? Takeda rubbed his face. I spent 30 years in the Imperial Army. I believed in the Emperor. I believed in Bushido. I sent men to die for those beliefs. And now I sit in an American prison, eating American food, being treated with American dignity, and I wonder if everything I believed was a lie designed to make dying seem noble. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then a young private, couldn't be more than 20, spoke. My brother wrote me a letter before I shipped out. He was in a Kamikaze unit. He said he was honored to die for Japan. He said he would see me in Yasukuni. Tears streamed down his face. He crashed into an American carrier in October, killed himself and 47 American sailors. And for what the Americans still came, they still won. His death changed nothing. 47 American families lost fathers and sons and brothers. My family lost him, all that death. All that pain? For nothing. Not nothing, Tanaka said quietly. For the Emperor's pride. For generals who will never fly kamikaze missions themselves. For politicians who will survive the war in bunkers while we died in the sky and on the sea and in the mud. Enough. Colonel Takeda raised his hand. We're not here to breed bitterness. We're here to find a way forward, to figure out how to live when we were trained to die, to reconcile what we were with what we've become. He looked at Hagawa. You're new. Tell us, why did you survive? Hagawa's throat tightened. I didn't mean to. My plane was hit. I crashed. The Americans pulled me out. I tried to die 3 times on their ship. They stopped me every time. Why do you think they did that? I don't know. I do. Takeda's eyes were sad. Because they see us as human beings, not as abstract enemies, not as monsters, as young men who were thrown into a war they didn't start and forced to make impossible choices. He paused. The question is, can we see ourselves that way? The meetings became Hagawa's anchor, twice a week, late at night. 8 men, sometimes 10, sometimes 12, sitting in a circle and speaking the unspeakable. They talked about their families, their fears, their shame, their confusion at being treated well by people they'd been taught to hate. On May 3, 1945, a new prisoner arrived, Navy pilot Lieutenant Takeshi Watanabe, shot down during a conventional bombing run over Okinawa. He joined their circle the 3rd night. "The Americans gave me chocolate," Watanabe said like he was confessing a sin. "Real chocolate, from their own rations. I said no. The guard young kid, maybe 19, he said, 'It's okay. We got plenty. You look like you need it more than me.'" He shook his head. "How do I accept chocolate from someone I was trying to kill 2 days ago?" "You eat it," Colonel Takeda said. "You say thank you. You remember that cruelty is a choice, and so is kindness, and the Americans are choosing kindness even when they have every reason to choose cruelty." "But it makes me feel weak." "No, it makes you feel human. There's a difference." On May 8, 1945, news spread through the camp Germany had surrendered. VE Day, the European theater was over, which meant the full weight of American military might would now turn toward Japan. That night, the circle met in silence. Everyone knew what this meant. The end was coming. Fast. "They'll invade the home islands by autumn," Colonel Takeda said. "Kyushu first, then Honshu. Tokyo will burn. Osaka will burn. Everything will burn. The generals will call for every man, woman, and child to fight to the death, to become human shields, to die for the emperor with bamboo spears and kitchen knives and bare hands if necessary." "My mother is in Kyoto," someone whispered. "My children are in Hiroshima. Shippoi. My wife is in Yokohama with our 3 daughters. My brother is in the Home Defense Force. He's 16. The weight of it crushed down on them. They were alive and safe in an American prison while their families faced annihilation. "We have to survive this," Tanaka said suddenly. "We have to live. We have to go home and tell people the truth that the Americans aren't devils, that surrender isn't the end, that there's life after defeat." "No one will listen," Yamada said. "They'll call us cowards, traitors." "Maybe, but we have to try, because if we don't, if we let the propaganda win even after the war is over, then all this death was for nothing." May 15, 1945. 3 weeks into captivity, Hagawa was washing dishes when Sergeant Wilson came into the kitchen with a newspaper. "Hey Hagawa, you read English, right?" "Some." "Look at this." He spread the newspaper on the counter. The headline, "Marines take Sugarloaf Hill on Okinawa after 11 days of hell. Casualties mount." Hagawa scanned the article. 2.662 American casualties. Estimated 4,000 Japanese dead. Sugarloaf Hill was less than a mile wide. "You know what gets me," Wilson said, not angry, just tired. "You guys fight like demons, never surrender, never retreat, die in place, and for what?" He pointed to a photograph, dead Japanese soldiers piled in a trench. "Those men didn't have to die. They could have surrendered. We would have treated them right, fed them, sent them home eventually. But they chose death. Why? Because surrender is dishonorable. Horseshit. Living ain't dishonorable. Living is the only thing that makes sense." Wilson lit a cigarette, offered one to Hagawa. Hagawa took it. First cigarette in 6 weeks. The smoke burned his lungs in the best way. "My kid brother is on Okinawa," Wilson said. "Infantry, 20 years old. He writes me letters about the fighting. Says the Japanese soldiers scream banzai and charge machine guns. Says it's like they want to die. He can't understand it. Hell, I can't understand it." He looked at Hagawa. "Can you, Yes. Explain it to me." Hagawa exhaled smoke. Watsurumomic watched it curl toward the ceiling. "We are taught from birth that the emperor is divine, that Japan is sacred, that dying for either is the highest honor a man can achieve. We are taught that surrender is worse than death, that captured soldiers bring shame on their families for 7 generations. He paused. "So when the choice is death or shame, we choose death, not because we want to die, because we cannot bear to live with the shame." "But that's..." Wilson struggled for words. "That's insane. That's throwing away lives for nothing." "Yes, so why don't you guys just stop surrender live? Because the machine doesn't stop until it runs out of parts, and we are the parts." Wilson stared at him for a long moment, then he crushed out his cigarette and walked away. But he left the newspaper on the counter. That night, Hagawa read the entire paper, every article, every casualty list, every photograph of destruction. and he realized something that made his chest ache. The Americans published their losses, listed their dead by name, honored them publicly. Japan would never do that. Japanese casualties were state secrets. Names were redacted. Families were given vague notifications, killed in action for the emperor. No details, no dignity, just erasure. The Americans treated their dead with more respect than Japan treated its living. June 7, 1945. 7 weeks into captivity. A Red Cross package arrived for Hagawa. Inside soap, a toothbrush, writing paper, a pencil, and a small Japanese-English dictionary. The card said, "From the American Red Cross, we hope for your swift return home after the war." Hagawa stared at the card for 10 minutes. They hoped for his return home. His enemy hoped he would survive and go home. He used the paper to write a letter. Not to his family, that was forbidden, and besides, what would he say? Instead, he wrote to the Americans who'd saved him. To Petty Officer Martin. To Doc Williams. To Morrison with the red hair. "Dear American sailors," he began, then stopped. "How do you thank someone for a mercy you didn't want?" He tried again. "I do not know your names. I only know your kindness. You pulled me from the ocean when you could have let me drown. You bandaged my wounds when you could have let me bleed. You stopped me from dying when I begged for death. I did not understand why. I still do not fully understand. But I am beginning to see that perhaps the world is more complicated than I was taught. Perhaps the enemy is not always evil. Perhaps mercy is not always weakness. Perhaps surviving is not always shameful. I do not know if I will ever go home. I do not know if I want to. But if I do, I will remember that the men who saved my life were the men I was sent to kill, and I will tell everyone who will listen that sometimes in the middle of war, humanity wins. Thank you." He folded the letter, put it in his footlocker, and never sent it, but writing it changed something in him, like lancing a wound to let the poison out. August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m., Hiroshima time. The news reached Camp Dealey 3 days later. A single bomb. An entire city gone. 80,000 dead in an instant, maybe more. The prisoners gathered in the mess hall, stunned into silence. The Americans had dropped the sun on Japan. There was no other way to describe it. "They're calling it an atomic bomb," Colonel Takeda said. "A weapon that splits atoms and releases energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. Hiroshima is gone. Just gone." "My brother was stationed in Hiroshima," someone whispered. "He was..." No one finished the sentence. There was no need. On August 9th, another bomb fell. Nagasaki, 40,000 dead. 2 cities erased in 3 days. That night, the circle didn't meet. Everyone sat on their bunks in shock, processing the reality that the war, the long, grinding, brutal war, was ending not with a fight, but with annihilation so complete that fighting became impossible. Hagawa lay in his bunk and thought about Nagoya, his home, less than 200 miles from Hiroshima. If the wind had been different, if the targeting had been different, his family would be ash. He'd tried to die 3 times to preserve his honor, and now his honor was meaningless because the war itself was meaningless. Japan had lost, not slowly, not with dignity, but in 2 blinding flashes that proved every kamikaze pilot, every banzai charge, every suicide defense had been futile. All that death, all that sacrifice, for nothing. On August 15th, 1945 at noon Tokyo time, the Emperor spoke on the radio for the first time in history. His voice was thin, reedy, using formal language most Japanese couldn't understand. But the message was clear: Japan had surrendered. The guards at Camp Dealey cheered, hugged each other, cried with relief. The war was over. They were going home. The prisoners sat in stunned silence. The war was over. They had survived. And survival felt like betrayal. That night, the circle met for the last time as prisoners of war. 15 men now, all trying to process what came next. "We go home," Colonel Takeda said. "We face whatever shame awaits us. We tell the truth about what we saw here, about how the enemy treated us with dignity when our own leaders treated us as expendable. And we live. We live long enough to prove that survival is not cowardly, that there is honor in choosing life over death." "And if no one listens," Yamada asked, "then we live anyway. We marry, have children, grow old, become the oak trees instead of the cherry blossoms. And maybe our children will understand what we could not, that life is always more valuable than death, no matter what the propaganda says." Hagawa thought about that. About being an oak tree. About Yoshida who'd died wanting the same thing. About all the pilots who'd crashed into ships believing death was the only honor. I want to find them, he said suddenly. The sailors who saved me. I want to thank them. I want them to know that their mercy mattered. Then you will, Takeda said. After we go home, after we heal, after we figure out how to be human again. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the guards were still celebrating. Inside, 15 Japanese prisoners sat in the darkness and tried to imagine a future they'd been trained to believe they didn't deserve. But the future was coming whether they deserved it or not. And perhaps that was its own kind of mercy, relentless, unavoidable, offering second chances to men who'd been taught that first chances were all you got. In a prison camp built to hold enemies, friendships had formed. In a war designed to dehumanize humanity had persisted. And in the ruins of an empire that had demanded death, a few men had chosen life. Not because it was easy, not because it was honorable, but because living was the only way to ensure that the dead were remembered, the truth was told, and the mistakes of war were never repeated. September 2nd, 1945. USS Missouri, Tokyo Bay, 9:02 a.m. Japan signed the surrender. At Camp Dealey, 400 miles south, the guards unlocked the gates at 1400 hours. Just opened them. No ceremony, no speeches, just you're free to move about the compound. Repatriation ships will arrive within 6 weeks. Free? The word tasted foreign in Hagawa's mouth. He stood at the open gate and stared at the space beyond. He could walk through it. Nothing would stop him. But his feet wouldn't move. You okay? Yamada stood beside him, equally frozen. I don't know how to be free. Me neither. They stood there for 20 minutes, 2 former prisoners staring at an open gate they couldn't bring themselves to cross. Finally, Sergeant Wilson walked over. You guys planning to stay because we're serving ice cream in the mess. Real ice cream. Celebration. Ice cream, Hagawa repeated, like the word belonged to another language. Yeah? Vanilla? Chocolate? Strawberry? Come on. They followed him. Not through the gate that was too much, but to the mess hall where American guards and Japanese prisoners sat together eating ice cream and trying to figure out what peace looked like. Hagawa chose vanilla. It was cold and sweet and made his teeth ache. He ate it slowly, and with each spoonful he thought, I am alive. I am eating ice cream. The war is over. None of this should be possible. What will you do? Colonel Takeda asked. He sat across from Hagawa, his chocolate ice cream melting faster than he could eat it. When we go home, what will you do? I don't know. Will you return to flying? The thought made Hagawa's stomach turn. No, never. Then what? I don't know, Hagawa said again. Because the future was a void he couldn't see into. His entire life had been structured around dying young and honorably. He'd never imagined being 21 and alive and having to figure out what came next. That night he wrote another letter, this time to his family. Dear Mother and Father, I am alive. I know you were told I died on April 12th. I did not. I crashed, but American sailors pulled me from the ocean. I have been a prisoner of war at Guam for 4 months. I am unharmed. The Americans treated me well. I will come home soon. I do not know if you will want to see me. I do not know if I have brought shame upon our family, but I wanted you to know I survived. Your son, Kaworu. He gave the letter to the Red Cross representative, who came through the camp collecting mail. Will it reach them? Eventually. Mail service to Japan is a mess right now, but we'll get it there. Thank you. The representative, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Patterson, put her hand on his shoulder. I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you're going home. But home felt less like a destination and more like a reckoning. October 17, 1945. Repatriation began. They loaded 400 prisoners onto LST-779, a landing ship tank converted for transport, the same type of ship that had brought American troops to Japanese-held islands. Now it was bringing Japanese prisoners back to Japan. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The journey took 3 days. Hagawa spent most of it on deck watching the ocean pass beneath them. The same ocean that had almost killed him. The same ocean that held the bodies of Yoshida and Tanaka and thousands of other pilots who'd crashed and never surfaced. You think about them, Yamada asked. He'd appeared beside Hagawa without making a sound. The ones who died. Every day. Me too, my entire submarine crew, 68 men. I was the only one who got out. His voice cracked. Why me? Why not the captain who had 3 kids? Why not Nakamura, who was getting married in November? Why did I get to live and they didn't? There's no answer to that question. I know, but I keep asking it anyway. They stood in silence, watching the ocean. Then Yamada said, "My father fought in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904. He was at Port Arthur. He told me once that the hardest part of war wasn't the fighting. It was coming home afterward and trying to explain to people who weren't there why you couldn't just forget and move on." He wiped his eyes. "I didn't understand then. I do now." October 20th, 1945. The LST docked at Uraga Harbor just south of Yokohama. Hagawa stepped onto Japanese soil for the first time in 6 months. The Japan he'd left no longer existed. Yokohama was rubble, entire neighborhoods reduced to ash and twisted metal. The March 10th firebombing had killed 100,000 people in a single night. You could still see the scorch marks, could still smell the burnt concrete. "My God," someone whispered. "What did they do to us?" But it wasn't just what the Americans had done. It was what Japan had done to itself, throwing away millions of lives in a war it couldn't win, refusing to surrender until 2 cities had been vaporized. They were processed through a temporary repatriation center, former military barracks that now housed Red Cross workers and Japanese officials trying to account for returning soldiers. Name, rank, unit, next of kin. Same questions as the POW camp, but this time the people asking were Japanese. The official who processed Hagawa looked at his paperwork and frowned. 752nd Naval Air Group, Special Attack Unit. "Yes. You survived a Toko mission." "I crashed. Americans rescued me." The official's expression hardened. Disgust, contempt, shame. "I see. And you spent 4 months as a prisoner of war." "Yes." The official stamped his papers with more force than necessary. "You're cleared for travel. Next." That stamp, that single moment of judgment, told Hagawa everything he needed to know about coming home. He wasn't a survivor. He was a failure. A coward who'd let himself be captured instead of dying properly. He collected his discharge papers and 200 yen, about $13, his final payment from the Imperial Japanese Navy for 6 years of service. Enough for train fare to Nagoya and maybe a week's worth of food. Colonel Takeda found him outside the processing center. "Where are you going?" "Home, Nagoya." "I'm going to Tokyo, or what's left of it." Takeda extended his hand. "If you ever need anything, a job, or reference someone to talk to who understands, contact me. I'll be at the Ministry of Veterans Affairs, assuming there still is one." They shook hands. "Thank you, Colonel." "We survived, Hagawa. That's not nothing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But as Hagawa boarded the train to Nagoya, he knew that survival meant different things to different people. To him, it meant carrying the weight of every pilot who hadn't made it back. Yoshida's wife would never see her husband again. Tanaka's mother would never hold her son. But Hagawa would walk back into his family home and have to explain why he was alive when so many weren't. October 21st, 1945. 4:47 p.m. Nagoya Station. The city had been bombed 13 times between December 1944 and July 1945. Over 10,000 dead. The Mitsubishi aircraft plant where his father had worked was destroyed. The neighborhood where he'd grown up was gone, just foundations and chimneys standing like tombstones. Hagawa walked through streets he didn't recognize anymore. Everything was ash and absence. People moved like ghosts, thin, exhausted, defeated. No one made eye contact. No one smiled. Japan had lost the war in its soul at the same time. His family home was in the Atsuta ward near the shrine. He'd sent the letter from Guam 6 weeks ago. Maybe it had arrived. Maybe they knew he was coming. Maybe they'd prepared themselves, or maybe they'd hoped the letter was a mistake. He found the house at 6:13 p.m. just as the sun was setting. It was still standing, damaged roof, broken windows, but standing. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was home. Hagawa stood at the gate for 5 minutes, trying to find the courage to knock. What do you say to parents who buried you? How do you walk back into a life you were supposed to have left behind? Finally, he knocked. Footsteps inside. The door opened. His mother stood there, thinner than he remembered. Gray hair where there had been black eyes that had seen too much loss. She stared at him like he was a ghost. "Mother," Hagawa said, "I'm home." She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. Then she slapped him, hard, across the face. The sound echoed in the quiet street. "How dare you?" Her voice shook with rage and grief and confusion. "How dare you come back? We mourned you. We held a funeral. Your father burned incense for 100 days. Your sister cried until she made herself sick, and now you just appear, like none of that mattered. Mother, we were told you died honorably, that you crashed into an American ship, that you gave your life for the Emperor. We were proud. Do you understand? We were proud of you." Tears streamed down her face. "And now you tell me you were captured, that you survived, that everything we believed was a lie." Hagawa's father appeared behind her, older, harder. He looked at his son with eyes that held no warmth. "Come inside, quickly, before the neighbors see." They went inside. The house smelled like miso soup and old wood and shame. His mother wouldn't look at him. His father sat at the low table and lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "Your letter arrived 3 weeks ago," his father said. "We didn't believe it at first. Thought it was a cruel joke, but the Red Cross confirmed it. You were alive. Prisoner of war." He said those last 3 words like they tasted of poison. "Do you know what that means for this family?" "I did not choose to survive. I crashed. The Americans should have let you drown." His father's voice cracked. "That would have been merciful. That would have preserved your honor and ours. But instead, you let them save you. You let them feed you and clothe you and treat you like you deserved to live." He stood, walked to the window, stared out at the ruined neighborhood. "Your brother Hiroshi died in April, Okinawa, killed defending a cave against American flamethrowers. He was 16. He died bravely. He died as a man should. And you survived." The words hit like bullets. Hiroshi. Dead. 16 years old. The little brother who'd climbed trees and caught frogs and asked Kaworu to teach him how to fly. Gone. "I didn't know," Hagawa whispered. "Of course you didn't know. You were too busy being a prisoner." His father's shoulders shook. "I had 2 sons, one who died with honor, one who lived with shame, and I don't know which loss hurts more." Hagawa's mother finally spoke. "Where will you go? Go. You cannot stay here. The neighbors have already started talking. The Hayashi family lost both their sons at Iwo Jima. The Watanabes lost their father and eldest son. Everyone on this street has lost someone. And here you are, alive, healthy, having spent the war eating American food in an American prison." She looked at him with eyes that were empty of love. "You cannot stay. People will ask questions. They will judge us. They will say we raised a coward." "I am not a coward. I flew 3 missions. I tried to die. But you didn't die." His father turned around. "That's all that matters. You didn't die, and now we all have to live with the consequences." Hagawa stood. His legs felt weak. His chest felt crushed. "I will leave in the morning." "No." His mother's voice was cold. "You will leave now. Take some food from the kitchen. Take whatever money we can spare. But go. Please. Just go." She was begging him to leave. His own mother was begging him to disappear. He took 500 yen from the tin on the shelf. His father didn't stop him. He took 2 rice balls from the kitchen. He took his old school jacket from the closet. It still fit, barely. At the door, he turned back one more time. "I'm sorry for surviving, for disappointing you, for not being the son you deserved." His mother was crying. His father was staring at the floor. Neither of them said goodbye. Hagawa walked through Nagoya until he found himself at the train station. It was 9:34 p.m. The last train to Tokyo left at 10 Nazure. He bought a ticket with money his parents had given him to disappear. On the platform, he saw other men, like him, soldiers, returning home, finding no home to return to. They all had the same look, hollow, lost, carrying wounds that weren't visible but bled nonetheless. An old woman sat on a bench selling sweet potatoes from a cart. Hagawa bought one. It was hot and soft and tasted like childhood. "You just come back?" the woman asked. "Yes." "Where did you serve?" "Naval Air Corps." She nodded. "My grandson was Navy, died at Midway, never found his body." She wrapped another potato for him without asking. "Eat. You need your strength. The war is over, but the suffering isn't. It's just beginning." "Why do you say that?" "Because now we have to figure out how to live with what we've done, with what was done to us, with all the death and all the loss and all the guilt." She pressed the second potato into his hands. "That's harder than fighting. Fighting is easy. Living is what takes courage." The train arrived. Hagawa boarded, found a seat by the window. As they pulled away from Nagoya, he watched his hometown disappear into the darkness. Somewhere in that darkness was his family home, his parents who couldn't bear to look at him, his brother's empty room, the ghost of the boy he used to be. The train rattled north through the night, carrying 200 passengers and countless ghosts. Men who'd survived Guadalcanal, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, men who'd lost limbs, eyes, minds, men who'd come home to find no home waiting. Hagawa pressed his forehead against the cold window and thought about Yoshida, about the photograph of his wife, about his last words, "I wanted to be an oak tree." Yoshida was dead. Hagawa was alive, and he had no idea what to do with that fact. The train pulled into Tokyo Station at 4:17 a.m. The capital was a moonscape 86 square miles of rubble from the firebombing campaigns. The Imperial Palace still stood, though, protected, untouched, while 100,000 civilians had burned. The Emperor's residence remained pristine. Hagawa walked through Ueno Park as the sun rose. The park was full of people, homeless, jobless, hopeless. Women selling themselves for food, children begging, veterans sleeping under newspapers. This was victory. This was the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. This was what 3 million Japanese deaths had bought. He found a spot under a cherry tree, no blossoms now, just bare branches, and sat down. Tried to think about next steps, find work, find housing, find a reason to keep breathing. But all he could think about was his mother's face when she told him to leave. His father's words, "You survived," like it was an accusation, a crime. Maybe they were right. Maybe surviving was a betrayal of everyone who died doing what he couldn't. A man sat down beside him, older, maybe 60, missing his right arm. "You look lost, young man." "I am." "Just come back." "Last night." "Family." "They don't want me." The man nodded like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Mine didn't either. I came back from Manchuria in '32 with half my face missing. My wife took one look and left, took the kids, said she married a soldier, not a monster." He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I lived in this park for 2 years, thought about dying every day. Then one morning I woke up and realized something the war had taken enough from me. I wasn't going to give it my life to." "What did you do?" "I started over, got a job at a factory, made friends with other broken men, built a new life from the ruins of the old one." He looked at Hagawa. "The question isn't whether you deserve to be alive. The question is what you're going to do with the life you have." "I don't know." "Then figure it out, but do it quickly, because this..." He gestured at the park full of broken people. "This is what happens when you let shame destroy you. You become a ghost haunting your own life." He stood, walked away, left Hagawa sitting under the cherry tree as Tokyo woke around him. That night, Hagawa found a job washing dishes at a restaurant in Shinjuku. The owner didn't ask questions, just pointed him toward the sink and told him to work fast. The pay was minimal, barely enough for a bunk in a flophouse, but it was something. For 3 months, he washed dishes, stayed silent, kept his head down, tried not to think about Yoshida or Tanaka or the sound his mother's hand had made against his face. But at night, lying in a room he shared with 6 other men, he thought about the Americans who'd saved him. Morrison with the red hair, Doc Williams who'd called him son, Petty Officer Martin who'd held him while he screamed. They'd shown him mercy when he'd expected execution. They'd treated him like a human being when his own people treated him like a disgrace. And somewhere in Ohio, maybe, or Texas, or wherever American sailors went after wars ended, they were living their lives unaware that the pilot they'd saved was working himself to exhaustion in a Tokyo restaurant trying to figure out if survival was a gift or a punishment. In January 1946, Hagawa decided it was a gift, not because he felt worthy of it, but because the alternative, letting shame kill him slowly, would make their mercy meaningless. He would live. He would remember. And someday, when Japan had healed enough to allow it, he would find the men who'd saved him and thank them for choosing compassion over vengeance, humanity over hatred, life over death. That decision made in a freezing flophouse while snow fell on the ruins of Tokyo was the first step in a journey that would take 50 years to complete. But freedom had come to Kaworu Hagawa. Late, difficult, painful. But it had come. And with it, the terrible, beautiful responsibility of living when so many could not. The years passed the way water wears down, stone slowly, relentlessly reshaping everything. By 1950, Hagawa had saved enough money to leave the restaurant. He took a job at a trading company in Yokohama, importing American goods. The irony wasn't lost on him, helping rebuild the trade between 2 nations that had tried to destroy each other 5 years earlier. He was good at it. Spoke English, understood both cultures, knew how to bridge the gap between former enemies who now needed each other to survive. In 1953, he married Keiko, a schoolteacher from Osaka, whose father had died at Leyte Gulf. She asked him once about the war, and he told her the truth that he'd been a kamikaze pilot, that he'd failed 3 times, that American sailors had saved him, that his own family had disowned him. "Good?" she said. "Good?" "That they saved you. Otherwise, I'd be marrying someone else, or no one. She took his hand. The war was insane. Anyone who survived it is a miracle. Don't apologize for being alive. They had 3 children, 2 daughters, 1 son. Hagawa never told them about the kamikaze missions, never told them about the suicide attempts or the shame or the fact that their grandparents in Nagoya refused to acknowledge their existence. He wanted them to grow up in a Japan that looked forward, not back. A Japan that built things instead of destroying them. But at night, when sleep wouldn't come, he thought about Morrison and Williams and Martin, the young American sailors who'd pulled him from the ocean and given him a life he didn't know what to do with. Were they alive? Had they made it home? Did they ever think about the Japanese pilot they'd saved? In 1975, 30 years after the war ended, Hagawa made a decision. He would find them, thank them, tell them that their mercy had mattered. He started with the ship's name USS Callahan DD-792, a trip to the library. Naval records. The Callahan had been sunk on July 28, 1945 by another kamikaze pilot off Okinawa. 47 crew members killed, 73 wounded. The ship that had saved him had been destroyed by someone doing what he'd failed to do. The guilt was physical, a weight in his chest that made breathing difficult. But the records also listed surviving crew members, the ship's roster, names, home states. Some were surely dead by now. 30 years was a long time, but some might still be alive. He wrote letters, dozens of them, to Veterans Affairs offices across America, to reunion associations, to anyone who might know what happened to Morrison Williams Martin. Most letters went unanswered. A few came back with polite notes. The veteran you're seeking is deceased, or we have no record of this individual. But in March 1976, he received a letter from San Diego, California. Mr. Hagawa, I'm writing on behalf of my father, James Williams, who served as a corpsman on the USS Callahan. Your letter was forwarded to us through the Navy Veterans Association. My father is 67 years old and in good health. He remembers you. He asks if you'd be willing to speak by telephone. Hagawa's hands shook so badly he could barely read the rest of the letter. It included a phone number. An international call would be expensive, prohibitively so, but he didn't care. He called that night, 11:00 p.m. Tokyo time, 6:00 a.m. California time. A woman answered, Williams residence? Hello, my name is Kaworu Hagawa. I am calling from Japan. I received a letter from... Oh my god, Dad, it's him. It's the pilot. Sounds of the phone being passed. Then a voice Hagawa hadn't heard in 31 years, Kaworu. Doc Williams. Jesus Christ, son, we thought you were dead. I thought the same about you. They talked for 2 hours. Williams explained what had happened after they'd transferred Hagawa to the New Mexico, how they'd continued fighting, how the Callahan had been hit by a kamikaze on July 28th, how he'd been below decks when it happened and had survived because of bulkheads. We lost good men that day, Williams said. Captain Bert Hoff, Morrison the redhead, who pulled you out of the water. He was standing on deck when the plane hit, killed instantly. His voice cracked. I think about him every July 28th, about how he saved your life in April and lost his in July. Hagawa closed his eyes. Morrison? Dead at 19 or 20. Red hair and freckles and a hand reaching down, grab my hand. I am sorry, Hagawa whispered. Don't be. Morrison did what he thought was right. He saw a human being who needed help, and he helped. That's who he was. Williams cleared his throat. Listen, there's a Callahan reunion coming up in September, San Diego. About 40 of us still alive. Would you consider coming? I know it's a long way, and I know it might be difficult, but I think the crew would want to meet you. To know that something good came out of all that death? Hagawa didn't hesitate. I will come. September 18, 1976. Hotel del Coronado, San Diego, California. Hagawa stood outside the ballroom where the USS Callahan reunion was being held. He'd flown 18 hours, spent money he shouldn't have spent, and now he couldn't make himself open the door. What if they hated him? What if seeing him brought back trauma? What if the door opened? A man in his 60s, gray hair, slight limp. Name tag James Williams Corpsman. Kaworu? Williams smiled. You made it. I made it. They embraced. Williams smelled like Old Spice and coffee. He felt solid, real alive. Come on, everyone's waiting. Inside, 40 men, all in their 50s and 60s, now all wearing USS Callahan reunion shirts, turned to look. The room went silent. Hagawa's throat closed. This was a mistake. He shouldn't have come. These men had lost friends to kamikaze attacks, lost their ship. What was he thinking? Williams raised his voice. Gentlemen, this is Kaworu Hagawa, Lieutenant Commander Imperial Japanese Navy. On April 12, 1945, we pulled him out of the Pacific after his plane was shot down. Some of you were there. Some of you helped save his life. Still silence. Then a man in the back stood up, tall, balding. Name tag Frank Martin, Petty Officer. Martin. He walked forward slowly, stopped 3 feet from Hagawa, and studied his face. You tried to hang yourself on the New Mexico. I stopped you. Yes? You were screaming, saying you wanted to die, that you were a coward. Yes? Martin's eyes filled with tears. And now look at you, alive, healthy, here. He opened his arms. Come here, son. They embraced, and then the room erupted, men standing, clapping, coming forward to shake Hagawa's hand, to pat his back, to welcome him. I remember you, one said. You were so young, just a kid. I helped pull you into the launch, another said. You were bleeding everywhere. I thought you wouldn't make it. Morrison talked about you, a third said quietly, before he died, said he hoped you survived, said you deserved a second chance. That broke something in Hagawa. He stood in a room full of men who should have been his executioners, and they were welcoming him like family. I have to say something, Hagawa managed. His voice was shaking. I have to tell you all something. The room quieted. On April 12, 1945, I tried to kill you. I flew my plane toward your ship with a bomb, and my only goal was to sink it, to kill as many of you as possible, to die in the process and bring honor to my emperor. He paused. I failed. My plane was hit, I crashed, and when I was drowning in the ocean, when I was certain I would die, you saved me. You pulled me out, you gave me water, you bandaged my wounds, you stopped me from killing myself 3 times. Tears streamed down his face now. For 31 years, I have tried to understand why. Why you showed mercy to someone who tried to kill you. Why you treated your enemy with more compassion than my own country treated its own soldiers. I still do not fully understand, but I know this: you gave me a life. You gave me a wife and 3 children. You gave me 31 years I was not supposed to have. And I came here today to say thank you, to tell you that your mercy mattered, that Morrison's death was not in vain, that every moment of kindness you showed me changed who I was. He bowed deeply. I am sorry for what I tried to do. I am grateful for what you did instead. Thank you. The room was silent. Then William spoke, quizzed. We were just doing what any decent people would do. We saw a human being in trouble. We helped. But I was not just any human being. I was your enemy. You were a kid in a terrible situation, Martin said. Same as we were. Same as Morrison. Same as all of us. The war made us enemies. But you know what? The war's over. Has been for 31 years. And I'd rather spend my time making friends than holding grudges. An older man, had to be 70, stood up. My name is Robert Chen, bosun's mate. I was on the Callahan for 2 years. Lost a lot of friends when she went down. For a long time, I hated all Japanese. Hated everything about Japan. Couldn't even see a Japanese car without feeling rage. He looked at Hagawa. But seeing you here, seeing you alive, seeing you as a person and not an enemy, it helps. It helps me let go of some of that hate. So thank you for coming, for being brave enough to face us. Others spoke, shared their stories, their pain, their healing. And slowly Hagawa understood they needed this as much as he did. They needed to see that their mercy had produced something good. That saving one life had rippled forward through time and created a family, a future, a testament to choosing compassion over cruelty. That night over dinner, Williams asked, what will you do now after this? I don't know. Go home. Tell my children about this. About you. Tell everyone, Martin said. Tell everyone about what happened, about how enemies became friends, about how mercy works. God knows the world needs more stories like that. Hagawa did tell everyone. He wrote a book in 1980, The Pilot Who Refused to Die, detailing his experiences as a kamikaze pilot, his capture, and his reunion with the Callahan crew. It became a bestseller in Japan, then in America, then across the world. He gave speeches at universities, veterans organizations, peace conferences. Always the same message: war makes us forget we are human. It turns people into abstractions, enemy, target, other. But I am living proof that even in the middle of war, humanity can win. Americans who should have let me die chose to save me, and that choice changed everything. In 1985, he established the Callahan Hagawa Peace Foundation, funded by his book royalties and donations from both American and Japanese sources. The foundation sponsored student exchanges between the U.S. and Japan, funded scholarships for descendants of Wabi Book II veterans on both sides, built memorials to reconciliation. At the 1990 Dambi Callahan reunion, Hagawa announced, "I have found 7 other kamikaze survivors who were saved by American forces. 7 men who, like me, were shown mercy when they expected execution. They want to meet you. They want to say thank you." The reunion became a reconciliation event. Japanese survivors meeting American rescuers. Tears, embraces, forgiveness flowing in both directions. In 1995, on the 50th anniversary of the war's end, Hagawa and Williams appeared together on national television in both Japan and America. An interviewer asked Williams, "Do you regret saving him, knowing that if his attack had succeeded, Americans would have died?" Williams didn't hesitate. "No, because if we'd let him die, we would have become what we were fighting against. We would have proven that the Japanese propaganda was right, that Americans were cruel, inhuman, monstrous. By saving him, we showed that we were better than that we could be enemies in war and still see each other's humanity." "What about you, Mr. Hagawa?" the interviewer asked. "What did you learn from this experience?" Hagawa thought for a long moment. "I learned that propaganda is a weapon more dangerous than bombs. It teaches us to hate abstractions instead of seeing individuals. It makes dying seem noble and living seem shameful. It turns children into weapons and calls it honor." He paused. "I also learned that mercy is the most radical act in war. It is easy to kill your enemy. It takes courage to save them." By 2000, Hagawa was 76 years old. He'd attended 15 Callahan reunions, watched the numbers dwindle as men died of age and illness. Williams had passed in 1998, Martin in 1999. One by one, his rescuers were disappearing. At the 2003 reunion, the last one, as it turned out, only 12 Callahan veterans remained. Hagawa gave a speech. "When I was 21 years old, I believed that dying for my emperor was the highest honor. I was wrong. The highest honor is living for something bigger than yourself, building instead of destroying, loving instead of hating, choosing mercy over vengeance." He pulled out a photograph worn faded but still clear. Morrison, red hair, freckles, 19 years old, smiling. This young man died on July 28, 1945, killed by a kamikaze pilot doing what I was trained to do. He was 19. He had a mother in Arkansas who never got over his death. He had a girlfriend who married someone else but kept his letters until she died. Hagawa's voice broke. "Morrison saved my life in April, and 4 months later another pilot like me took his. I carry that guilt every day, but I also carry this promise that his mercy will not be forgotten, that his compassion will ripple forward through time, that his death will mean something because his life meant everything." He held up the photograph. "I have 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, 12 lives that exist because Morrison chose compassion over convenience, humanity over hatred, 12 lives that carry his legacy forward. That is not redemption. Nothing can redeem the horror of war, but it is something. It is a small light in a very dark chapter of history." The room was silent except for the sound of old men crying. Kaworu Hagawa died on March 15, 2004 at the age of 79. Heart failure. Peaceful, surrounded by family. His funeral was attended by 2,000 people. Japanese veterans, American veterans, students whose educations his foundation had funded, families from both nations who'd been brought together by his work. His son Takeshi, named after Lieutenant Watanabe from the POW camp, gave the eulogy, "My father spent the last 59 years of his life trying to repay a debt he believed he owed, but the debt wasn't to the American sailors who saved him. It was to the pilots who died doing what he couldn't, to Yoshida and Tanaka and the thousands of young men who crashed into ships believing they were doing the right thing. He wanted them to be remembered not as fanatics or terrorists, but as victims of propaganda, as boys who deserved better than what their country gave them. And he wanted the Americans who showed him mercy to be remembered as proof that even in the darkest moments, humanity can win." At Hagawa's request, his ashes were divided, half buried in Japan, half scattered in the Pacific off San Diego near where the USS Callahan had operated in April 1945. 2 nations, 1 man, 1 story of redemption and reconciliation. The Callahan Hagawa Peace Foundation continues today. It has sponsored over 10,000 student exchanges, built 3 memorials, 1 in San Diego, 1 in Tokyo, 1 at the site where the Callahan sank, created a scholarship fund that has educated 500 descendants of Wabiobatu veterans. At the Tokyo Memorial, there's a plaque with 2 photographs side by side. On the left, Kaworu Hagawa, age 21, in his flight suit looking terrified. On the right, Seaman Morrison, age 19, grinning at the camera, red hair bright in the sun. Below the photographs, an inscription in Japanese and English, "They were enemies for one day and brothers forever. May their story remind us that mercy is always possible, even in war." In 2023, 78 years after the war ended, a high school student in California discovered Hagawa's story while researching a history project. She interviewed Hagawa's granddaughter via video call, asked her, "What did your grandfather want people to learn from his experience?" The granddaughter Yuki, a professor of peace studies at Tokyo University, thought for a moment. He said that survival is not shameful, that living with purpose is more honorable than dying without it, that the enemy is never as evil as propaganda makes them seem, and that one act of mercy can echo through generations. She pulled out a worn photograph Hagawa and Williams at the 1995 reunion, arms around each other, both smiling. He also said that the war didn't end on the USS Missouri in 1945. It ended in a hotel ballroom in San Diego in 1976 when former enemies embraced as friends. That's when peace truly began. The student included Hagawa's story in her project. Won first place at the regional history fair. Her presentation went viral on social media, millions of views, thousands of comments, as people from around the world saying the same thing: "I never knew this story. Thank you for sharing it." Because that's how truth survives. Not through governments or textbooks, through individuals who refuse to let mercy be forgotten, through stories passed down and shared and amplified until they become part of our collective memory. Kaworu Hagawa tried to die for a lie, but Americans saved him, and he spent the rest of his life spreading the truth that our enemies are human, that mercy is stronger than hate, that one act of compassion can change the world. He was a kamikaze pilot who refused to die, then became a man who refused to let others forget why living matters. The debt he thought he owed could never be repaid. But in trying to repay it, he gave us something priceless, proof that even in war's darkest moments, humanity can choose mercy over murder, compassion over cruelty, life over death. Morrison died saving a life. Hagawa lived honoring that sacrifice. And their story, our story, reminds us that remembering is resistance, that forgiveness is possible, that enemies can become brothers if we choose to see each other's humanity. They built war on hatred, but it is remembered through love. If you believe their names deserve to be remembered, share this story. And in the comments below, write one name: someone who showed you mercy when you expected judgment, compassion when you deserved condemnation. Let their names echo forward the way Morrison's and Hagawa's do, because that's how we win against hate, by remembering that mercy happened, documenting that compassion existed, and ensuring that no one who chose humanity in the face of horror is ever forgotten.